This was the biggest change I made to take my close rate from 11% to over 25% consistently. And that was with cold traffic. These are not leads that had a ton of indoctrination or nurturing or came from organic. This is cold traffic. So I'm going to break down exactly what that was in this video. And it had nothing really to do with any high pressure sales tactics or tricky wordplay or anything like that. It really came down to realizing one very important thing and completely revamping my discovery process and understanding what the discovery process actually is for. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. So my sales background, I've done a ton of different random sales jobs. They were kind of the first jobs I got started with. I've sold in person at retail stores. I've cold called. I've done high ticket coaching programs, B2B services, a ton of other stuff too. There's been some real estate stuff I've done. And while I've done a lot of one-to-one selling, my personal favorite thing to do is copywriting. And the reason being is copywriting is selling with text. So you don't have the opportunity to go back and forth with someone and kind of handle their concerns or objections. You need to write a really solid argument and really give them a ton of epiphanies and belief shifts to ultimately move them to the next action. And it's because of that background in copywriting and also all of my experiences with sales that I slowly started to piece together this process. And of course, there were a lot of inspirations and coaches and mentoring and things of that sort that I worked with that helped me realize this stuff. One specifically is Cole Gordon. He had a huge influence on my discovery process. But because I can see both the copy side and the one-on-one sales side, I was able to merge that and really create a huge realization for myself that not only made me a better copywriter, but took my one-to-one sales close rates up exponentially. So that being said, let's go into how to master the discovery process. So what really is discovery and what isn't it? So a common misconception is that most people treat discovery like small talk or just trying to kind of understand what the person's thinking, why they got on the call, and just very basic stuff. I've been on tons of sales calls, especially with tech companies for some reason, where you get on, they ask you some questions like, oh, what do you do? How long have you been doing it? What has you reach out? And you mentioned like some features or whatever the case is. And then they just go into a 30, 45-minute demo. And I think we all inherently know that's not the best way to do things. But I think most people who are in sales who want to get good at it, they start to do some research, maybe get on YouTube or take some courses, and they start to learn about the discovering process. And I know that because this is what I did. But you go through, you start learning, okay, well, I need to ask questions. I got to find their problem. I have to understand their problem. And then I have to show how our solution could potentially fix that problem. And you just start asking very basic questions. It helps to an extent, but it never really gives you that big jump, especially with cold traffic, because cold traffic is very hard to close. There's a lot of loops that you need to go through, a lot of belief shifting that you need to have happen. And with a generic discovery process and some other stuff that I'm probably going to cover outside of this video, more in how to actually pitch people, it's very hard to close. So the reality is, and like I mentioned, I learned this framework from Cole Gordon, and it's very good, but what really changed was understanding why it works and how to adapt it based on what I was hearing in real time on that call. And more importantly, just like why you even do it in the first place. So the mindset shift that I made was realizing that discovery isn't about getting the conversation started. It's controlling how the conversation ends. And this really just changed everything for me. So there are three purposes of discovery, and this is pretty simple. It's very simplified. There's a lot that goes into each of these, but at a high level, this is what you're trying to achieve. First is you want to make their desired outcome clear, specific, and emotionally important. Yes, if someone gets on a call and they tell you their problem is leads, for example, they need more leads, that's not specific enough. Like, what does that actually mean? I need more leads. Because you could immediately start pitching, oh, well, we can get you 100 leads or 1,000 leads. But what if 1,000 is too big for someone? What if 100 is too small? What if, whatever situation it is, you need to know exactly what they're trying to achieve and more importantly, why they're trying to achieve it or solve the problem that they have. The second part is going to be to help them feel the urgency and real cost of not fixing that problem. There are ways to create urgency with your offer. You can do discounts, you can do bonuses, you can do limit time offers. There's so many things you can do with your offer, but that's not what I'm talking about here. What you're actually trying to do is show them the urgency and real cost of that problem so they themselves realize, wow, I need to solve this right away. And then your added bonuses or whatever, the fast action bonuses that you add, or some deadline for a new program, whatever the case is, that's the thing that gets them over the edge. You never want that to be what's selling them, because if it is the thing that sells them and you accidentally oversell that stuff, you're going to get refunds, you're going to get complaints, customer satisfaction is going to be low. So you really need to focus on creating urgency in discovery and showing them, hey, here's reality. You really got to deal with this. This is a much bigger problem than you're making it. You're losing a ton of money. And if you don't fix it now, here are the things that are going to happen in the future. So once you clearly understand the outcome or the problem that they're trying to solve, then also what it's costing them and why they need to solve it now you've got someone who's clear on where they're going and they feel an urgency to get there. The last problem is going to be showing them what their real problem is, not what they think it is. Now, that's a brief overview of all three of these. I'm going to dive deeper into each one now. But at a high level, again, this is what we're looking to do. And if you can achieve these three things, you're going to have a huge impact on your close rate. So let's get into the first one in making the outcome crystal clear. So like I said, when I first got started, I'd ask people their goals and they'd say stuff like, I want to grow my business. I want to make more money. I want to save on taxes. And I just nod and say, oh, I got it. That makes sense. I see why you reached out now. But now I go way deeper. For example, if someone tells me they want to save on taxes, I've got to understand, okay, well, how much are they paying in taxes now? How much do they want to save? Why do they want to save that much? What are they going to do with that money? Are they going to reinvest it? Because all of this is giving me a much better understanding of what the actual outcome or the desired end state that they're trying to achieve is. And then when you're pitching them, you can show them, hey, we're going to help you get that desired end state, not just, hey, we're going to get you more leads. People are scheduling calls because, yes, they say they need something, but there's a much deeper story that they're not going to tell you if you don't dig. So after you get those specific numbers, you want to uncover the real motivation. So when they say something like, I'm paying around 180K, I'd love to get that down to 80K so I can reinvest the rest into my business and maybe buy a rental property, something like that. Okay, now you're trying to see it. You'd want to go much deeper than that, but you're getting a full picture. You should literally almost like see it in your head as they're explaining it to you. Like, what is that desired outcome? Because once you can see it, that means they can see it too. Because most people don't actually quite understand, or they haven't really built out the vision of what they're trying to achieve or why they want to fix something. They just know, or they have a feeling that something's wrong. They want to change. They just don't know what they actually want yet. So we can show them, and that makes us an authority. It helps them actually see if what we're offering is even the right solution. In some cases, it's not, and that's okay. You tell them that, and they can see that as well. And that's why in my last point here, I put provide clear direction. Without that level of clarity, you just can't provide clear direction. Your pitch is just guessing. You're kind of telling them what you want. You're more trying to sell what you have to them versus showing them why your thing is the best option for them. And that's completely different. If you're forcing your product on people, you're going to struggle, especially with cold traffic. If you're showing people why your solution is the best way for them to achieve their goal, you're going to get much higher close rates, much better customer satisfaction, everything. It's just way better overall. And yeah, if you're a great example of this is if you walked up to someone and you just said, hey, can I get directions? And they just pointed, you'd know that they're not helping. You immediately, like, you didn't give them any information. You didn't tell them where you're going, how you're getting there, when you're going, nothing like that. They just pointed in a random direction. So you know they're not helping. And that's a dramatic example, but that's what most people do on sales calls. And again, I know all of this because I did it myself and I've missed out on a ton of sales because of it. But if you can create that clear direction and then show people the path, I mean, it's going to help so much. So now let's move on to the next step, which is going to be helping them feel the cost of inaction. So now that you've got a clear idea of what they're trying to achieve and what they want to do, you have to understand what the cost is. So understanding true urgency I used to think it was about me. Again, I kind of mentioned this earlier, like the pitch, the offer, discounts, bonuses, all that stuff. But real urgency comes from helping the prospect see the true cost of doing nothing. There might be some cases where someone gets on the call and you sell something that's $10,000. And if you solved it for them, it would save them 5 grand. It's not a good trade off. Like there's no reason to sell that person because you can't help them enough. And that doesn't mean you lower your costs. You just have to find the right person who has big enough cost to ultimately sell that. So on the other hand, if you have someone you get on and you realize, oh, this is costing them $100,000 a year, and it only costs us our service is only $10,000. There's a big enough gap there between what it's costing them and how much you're charging to solve that problem that it makes sense. There's clear ROI. But again, you wouldn't know that if you didn't dig deeper before, and you wouldn't know that if you don't dig deeper on the cost of an action. So the other thing that happens when you dig into the cost of inaction and build urgency is you help them overcome the idea that they can fix it later. Most people, if a problem isn't very, very clear and very like almost make or break or do or die, they'll kind of just push it off. I'll fix it later, think about doing stuff later. But if you're able to show them like, hey, you're losing 5 to 10K a month from these inefficiencies, you're missing tax write-offs, or your cash flow is not being tracked properly, whatever it is, that's 60K to 120K each year gone. Now they're like, okay, that's a lot. And if you're talking to someone who's making, say, 120K in their business or 200K a year in their business, and you're showing them that they're missing out on 60 to 120K that could probably be profit, again, building urgency, building the cost of inaction, showing them, hey, this is a problem you should get solved. And when you solve this problem, it's going to get you to that desired outcome. Now, you do that by asking really probing and digging questions like, how long has this been a problem? What is it costing you right now, financially, emotionally, mentally? Is it keeping you from scaling your business? What happens if nothing changes in 6 months and a year? All that kind of stuff. Now, once you do that, you're going to reveal the existing urgency, so you don't have to do gimmicky stuff in your offer. You have someone who actually wants to buy for their own reasons, not yours. And again, you can use kind of the gimmicky stuff to get people over the edge, but I don't personally like to use a lot of that stuff. Bonuses and things like that are fine if it solves specific problems. This is total side point. But anyways, so reveal existing urgency. Yep, we just tapped on that. You didn't create that urgency through gimmicks, you just revealed the existing urgency. So now we're going to talk about the last part, which is reframing the real problem. Now, this is very important, and I'm not going to go into exactly how to do this in the pitch yet, because I'll do that in another video. It's way too long for this video. But that being said, we've covered so far the first thing, looking at these three again, you got the desired outcome clear. You've got the urgency and the cost of action. But what is a huge, or what's going to create a huge bump in close rates is going to be reframing the real problem. So let me explain kind of how this works. So most prospects come into a call thinking they already know what their problem is. I just need more leads, or my team needs to perform better, or I need to increase my close rates, for example. And they think that that is the problem. Or they think their offer's broken. And early on, I would always make the mistake of latching onto that as the problem that I was trying to solve. But in reality, that's the worst way to go about it. So I would say, yep, I agree. I'd still use some of my discovery questions. At that time, I wasn't doing it as well, but I would use discovery questions, understand what they thought the problem was, why they thought the problem was, some of the stuff that they had tried. And I'd say, okay, yep, I agree. I do think you need more leads. And, here's how we do it better. But the problem is if they think the problem is a lack of leads and they've already talked to 3 other agencies that didn't help them and they all said the problem was a lack of leads, and then you say you'll get them more leads, what do you think is going to happen? They're just going to be like, oh, he's just like everyone else. Like that, once I realized that, I realized how I've been pitching stuff incorrectly for years. Because I'll try to think of another example. I always go back to taxes for some reason. It's just an easy example. Everyone gets it. But with taxes, like if I'm an accountant and someone gets on a call and I say, I'm going to just be a better accountant, that's not a good way to pitch, because they can go shop every other accountant. And now you're competing on price, you're competing on deliverables, you're competing on all the stuff you don't want to compete on. Whereas if you can reframe their problem and actually help them see what is the root cause of their problem and how it's going to solve all these other issues they've been having, then you're going to get much better close rates, because there's kind of an epiphany and a realization of, wow, everyone else has been telling me this thing over here, but this guy's saying it's this. It all makes complete sense. They have proof as to why. And because of that, now I'm going to work with this group. And they can't go shop you to all those other accountants because you showed them the real problem. And because they now realize that real problem, you can show them your specific way for solving that problem. Therefore, more people are going to want to work with you because you're different. You're not the same as everyone else. So you figure out what the real problem is, or you're able to reframe what the real problem is by asking layered questions. So for example, one guy, and I kind of talked about this lead one, he just said, we're not getting enough leads. I asked, what kind of leads are you getting now? What's the quality like? What's your current sales process? Once someone opts in, all that kind of stuff. And it turns out he did not need more leads. He did not need really better leads either. He just needed to convert more of those leads. And that really came down to actually what we're talking about, is reframing the real problem, creating different differentiation, and not competing and being a commodity and what everyone else is. So once you provide that new perspective, and I reframed it, it's not that you don't have leads, you have a conversion problem, and explained how that works, why it works. Everything clicked, it made sense, and then they're ready to move forward. And this is true with any type of business that provides some sort of transformation. Transformation being you save someone money, you make them money, you save them time, things like that. That's really, people are looking, when they're getting a service, they're looking for an authority in that thing. And if you can show them, I am the authority because I understand not the surface problem everyone else talks about, but the deeper actual problem, you get way more people coming through, way more people converting. Your ads perform better, everything performs better. So now let's dive into the actual questions and kind of the framework that I use for discovery. Like I said, I went from 11% on cold close rates with one of my clients to 25%. And that's a 127% increase, which is, huge. And it's all because of this. It's because I understood how it worked and why you're supposed to do discovery and what you're looking for in discovery. And then I also had a basic framework that I would follow. This is not ever going to be like directly in a line where it's question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's gonna kind of flow, and you got to memorize it so you can flow throughout the call and hit all the points that you need to hit. But the questions go in this order. What's the biggest challenge you're dealing with? What's your ultimate goal? What's the number? Another thing is, too, kind of a side note, you want to make sure you're using the right tonality. I'm reading these off just as they're listed, but when you're on the call, you want to be kind of have like a questioning tone or a curious tone, and that'll help people to open up more. Number 3, why that number specifically? What's a non-monetary goal? Where are you at currently? How long has this been a problem? Why fix it now? What happens if nothing changes? What do you feel like the problem is? That's very key, because again, you want to figure out, what do they think the problem is? What have other people told them? So what have you tried? Who else have you worked with? Do you have a partner involved? That's going to help you understand what in their head seems like the problem, or what they think the problem is. And then you can show them, hey, I totally get why you think it is this. But in reality, because of these reasons that you mentioned, it's probably this. And here's what we found. And that's how you give them that reframe. And then where do you want to be in 3 years? Setting that vision and showing them, once you solve this problem, you're headed towards that vision. Now, like I said, I don't ask these like I'm reading a checklist. It's conversational, it's tailored, but you don't want to skip this stuff or these questions, because these are the questions that are going to help you pull out and discover the 3 things that we discussed above that will help you create that reframe. So if you're not getting the results, stop focusing on the close, focus on discovery. If you can do this right, the close becomes very easy. And then you're just going to get probably financial objections if that's the case. If you can do this and then show someone in your pitch like clear ROI, I used that example earlier of, if you can save someone $100,000 on taxes and your investment's $10,000, it's very hard to say no to that. That's a very, very good offer. It's very easy to sell. You're selling free money essentially. But again, you need to go through all of this, because if you just told someone, hey, I want to save you, or I can save you on taxes, then you explain your process why. You can't show any ROI. You can't show anything like that will allow you to close a lot easier. So you got to make sure you ask this stuff, and then the pitch becomes way easier. That's how you get cold leads into clients, and you can scale aggressively, because if you can close at 20, 25% on cold traffic, there's a good chance that you can pretty much scale to however much in ad spend you want. And that's because 20-25% close rate, you can usually get calls anywhere from 100 to 300, 400, depending on the offer, maybe sometimes higher, and it still works. And get show rates to a good point, everything. The metrics and the economics of the funnel just work when you're able to close at higher rates. It's very hard to do when you're at like 10, 15%. It's doable, but you got to be selling something super, super high price. So that's why this is so important. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching.